Hello and welcome to this edition of Access Asia. Coming up, China's vaccine diplomacy is trying to boost the country's image abroad while helping poor nations. We'll find out if there are any side effects. Japan's COVID-19 rebels. As a pandemic drags on, the government takes new steps to crack down on rule breakers. And what goes around comes around in South Korea. We'll take a look at how the country underwent a recycling revolution in just one generation. Now, it's called vaccine diplomacy. Wealthy countries were quick to snatch up vaccines from Western companies. That left low-income ones to look elsewhere. Enter China and India. Both countries are racing to fill international orders of their locally made vaccines, though sometimes strings are attached. For more, we can speak to Yanzhong Huang from the Council on Foreign Relations. Mr. Huang, thank you for speaking to France 24. Let's begin with China. What are the foreign policy goals of its vaccine diplomacy, and are they paying dividends?
Well, for China, I think it wants to send the vaccines abroad to achieve multiple foreign policy objectives. First, they want to showcase their high-tech strength, the power capabilities. And second, they want to demonstrate it is a responsible great power. And third, they want to also expand their market share and potentially also help, facilitate its economic relations with other countries in terms of like access to raw materials and market, etc.
Has there been any pushback to this vaccine diplomacy?
Well, it is interesting, certainly, but China is not the only player now in this game, that they have to force this competition from other vaccine makers in other countries, like India and Russia. And for many of those countries that are receiving end of the vaccine diplomacy, they certainly don't want to put all the eggs in one basket. So very often, they try to contract with multiple countries in terms of vaccine access. So that would dilute the gains for Beijing from practicing the vaccine diplomacy.
Yeah, you mentioned India. India has long tried to counter Chinese influence. What has it done during this pandemic?
Well, India, compared to China, is a relatively latecomer in this game of vaccine diplomacy. But we know that the Serum Institute of India is one of the largest vaccine makers, and it is licensed to produce AstraZeneca, Oxford's vaccines, and so far we know, the AstraZeneca's vaccine has been very popular in the lower and middle income countries. So China has to face this formidable competition from India in practicing its vaccine diplomacy.
I'm curious if the people in these two countries are happy that vaccines made in their backyards are being shipped abroad.
Well, I think China, this doesn't seems to be so far seems to be an issue, and Chinese people seems to be quite happy. Their vaccines being shipped abroad. Support other countries, mitigating that access gap between wealthy and poor nations. And in the meantime, I think that is because that most people in China, because they have few cases in the country, they have this, very very low perceived risk of infection. So they don't feel that strong urgency to get vaccinated. So they, then why not just ship the vaccines to other countries?
One final question. It's interesting we're not seeing the same strategy from the United States, United Kingdom, or the European Union. Why is that?
Well, that is an interesting question, because we know that the OECD countries, including the United States, UK, they were very active in terms of providing the health-related development assistance, but this time, I think maybe because they were hit particularly hard by the pandemic, and they feel, there's a strong this urgency to vaccinate their own population in order to achieve herd immunity as soon as possible. So that sort of relieved them of all these moral obligations of helping other nations in achieving herd immunity. But I think after they achieve herd immunity, they might then consider shipping the surplus vaccines abroad, to help other countries.
Mr. Huang, thank you very much for your analysis. Yanzhong Huang from the Council on Foreign Relations. Well, officials in Japan are getting tougher with restaurants and bars that violate coronavirus restrictions. While Japanese society is well known for its orderliness, as the pandemic drags on, some people are defying health protocols, and some fear it could lead to an increase in new cases. Our team on the ground reports.
Drinking until late in the midst of a pandemic. These are Japan's rule breakers. Under the state of emergency Japan declared in early January, these drinkers should have left for home by 8 p.m. But this restaurant, popular with late shift workers and students, doesn't close until 1 a.m. The restaurant manager isn't totally ignoring the dangers. Diners must order food using their own smartphones instead of the usual shared tablet devices. But the rooms are small, making it easier for the virus to spread. If the government makes good on threats to name and shame violators, this restaurant could be among them.
勝手な宣伝になるっていうのも思ってます。実際僕らこの20時以降営業してて、やっぱりお客さんって飲食店めちゃくちゃ探されてる方多いです。
Their defiance is at odds with the popular image of Japanese people as obedient and respectful of authority. Japan is one of the few countries where the government lacks the legal means to compel a lockdown, as the constitution lays out strict protections for civil liberties after the militarism of World War II.
欧米に比べると、そのお願いを聞く、文化というんですかね、そういう、性格があります。罰則がなくてもある程度はなんとかなるというふうに、政府等も考えていただろう。
But the government's patience began to wear thin after the surge in COVID cases at the start of the year. Revised legislation now allows police to issue fines of up to €2,300 to bars and restaurants if they refuse to close early.
Today, South Korea recycles 95% of its food waste, a figure that's so high it sets an example for many parts of the world. All the more inspiring is the fact that only 25 years ago, Koreans virtually didn't recycle any food at all. Ellen Gainsford takes a look at how the country cleaned up its act.
Sometimes small acts can make a big difference for the environment. South Korea is tackling food waste, one household at a time. When Myung-ja Kim prepares the evening meal for her family, she's already thinking about the leftovers.
I'm very careful about the food I throw away, to wring out all the liquid. It's to cut down on the waste and pay less.
Throwing away food now means paying extra. The country wastes a lot of food products, so the authorities decided to tackle the problem.
Generally in Korea, there's a main dish and then what they call the banchan, the side dishes like kimchi, beans, small fishes. And as people tend to have a lot of these, they end up with leftovers.
After dinner, Myung-ja and her son-in-law head to one of the city's smart bins.
Every household has a smart bin like this one. To open it, you swipe your card, then empty the waste. You see the weight is shown, then you pass the card again to close it. And all that is put on the bill at the end of the month.
Last month, the family's food bill only came to around €1.
861 is less than 1 year, I think. We pay as much as we wasted, so it's good. So we try to save our waste.
Before this scheme, the country only recycled 2% of its food waste. 20 years later, and 95% is recycled. The obligatory scheme has been in place since 2013. Waste has been reduced, as has the cost of bin collection for the city. It's meant a saving of €7 million for Seoul. Around 200 tons of food waste are collected by this lorry, then sent to be treated. They're compressed to get rid of any liquid.
What comes out is nearly dry.
The liquid that's separated is used to create biogas or oil, while the remains are dried further.
This is what we get when we've dehydrated it. We use it as food for animals or as compost in the city's gardens.
Gardens like this one, in between tower blocks. Encouraged by the local authority, there's around 170 across the city.
Well, if you're ever in Thailand, visit Chonburi, southeast of Bangkok, and you'll see a different kind of Paw Patrol. More than 24 dogs with their own wheelchairs, nursed back to health at a shelter called the Man That Rescues Dogs. Now, these 27 wheeled canines take a daily jaunt, but at the shelter, there are more than 600 dogs in total. The foundation survives on donations and tourism, both of which have dropped sharply amid the pandemic. Here's to hoping that they will find a way to keep things rolling smoothly. Well, that's it for this edition. Thank you for watching. Please stay tuned to France 24.
Sidi Bouzid, Tunisia, December 2010. A young fruit seller sets himself on fire. He feels ignored and abandoned by the government. His death stirs nationwide protest for democracy. It's the beginning of the Arab Spring.
We went out to protest against the regime. We didn't think we were making a revolution. But when the regime fell, we had dreams.
While Tunisians today enjoy freedom of expression, some are nostalgic for the dictatorship of President Ben Ali.
We had security, a health system, safety, and a bit of freedom.
Our reporters are in Sidi Bouzid, in a Tunisia caught between two stools. Have the achievements of the revolution met the dreams and expectations of the Tunisian people?
Sidi Bouzid Revisited, all this week here on France 24.
Culture is one of the many casualties of the coronavirus. Join us for a week of special programmes where we take you to the precious heritage sites that are fighting for survival. We also speak to the artists and museums that are using this time to create, rebuild and reinvent.
Encore, presented by Eve Jackson on France 24 and France24.com.